Hello, everyone, and welcome now, day number 8 of our reading through the 40 chapters of Exodus during the 40 days of Lent. Thank you to each of you for following this along and making this commitment. I'm glad to have you accompanying me here on our Lenten journey through Exodus. So we left off, and here are these characters. There's God, of course, who's God. There's Pharaoh, who thinks himself as God. And there is Moses, who thinks little of himself, and Aaron, who is very secondary in all of this. And the narratives going forward become not so much about Moses right now, and even God is primary, but what really grabs my attention is this is about the ignorance and stubbornness of Pharaoh. I stated before in the book of Genesis, which, to understand Exodus, you have to understand Genesis. Every time, both times Abraham and then Isaac is in Egypt, things go awry, and the Egyptians end up looking like fools. And throughout this narrative here, the Egyptians are certainly expressed through their representative leader, the Pharaoh, is looking like fools from early on when it came to the women outsmarting Pharaoh, through now God's servant Moses, who finds his own self to be very incapable. And yet here is, he's being outdueled in a sense, Pharaoh is, by this Moses, who nobody likes him at this point. So after the plague of the water turning to blood, now in chapter number 8, here, God says once more, go tell Pharaoh, release my people so that they can serve me. But if you refuse, there's going to be frogs. Frogs are going to come everywhere. And of course, here there's a demonstration. Aaron extended his rod, and here comes forth frogs. But in verse number 7, the magicians of Pharaoh were able to do the same thing. Okay, and remember, each of these plagues are attacking or incorporating something of Egyptian theology. The Nile, the river, was seen in a sense as moved by a god, as well as the serpents. And even these frogs here are seen as big theological symbols to the Egyptians. And what occurs is God shows his mastery over these symbols. And so, verse number 8, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Pray to the Lord that he may take the frogs away, and I will release the people that they may sacrifice to the Lord." However, Moses responds that here's this Moses who lacks confidence, but he responds in verse number 9, Moses said to Pharaoh, "You may have honor over me." And he said, when shall I pray for you, your servants and your people, for the frogs to be removed from you and your houses, so that they will be left only in the Nile? He said, "Tomorrow." And Moses said, "It will be as you say, so that you will know that no one is like the Lord. The frogs are going to depart." And then Moses goes and he cries out to God. Once more in the narrative, here is a crying out, as the people were doing to God, Moses is doing to God. The Lord does as Moses asked, and the frogs all die. to the extent there's just stacks of frogs, and the odor from their decay is quite compelling. And yet Pharaoh has morphed now from being just an individual with merely a hardened heart to being someone who is a liar, because he's not letting the people go. And so then we encounter plagues 3 and plagues 4 here. There are these gnats that are coming, and whereas the frogs invaded people's living space, the gnats here invade living space. They disrupt food, the food supply, the food that's growing, that has been harvested. They're just quite irritants. And the Egyptians of Pharaoh tries to replicate this one, and they're not able to. The magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God," in verse number 19. That's how compelling this is. But it doesn't stop there. Moses is unable to solicit a change of response from Pharaoh. So now the 4th plague, here comes a series of flies. Once more, similar to the gnats, similar to the frogs, similar to the Nile and the waters turning his blood. These things really invade the living space of everyone, from the greatest to the least there in Pharaoh's land. Pharaoh is certainly not exempt. It probably creates some sickness. These various plagues. It's creating some malnourishment. It's creating some issues with food. And, of course, the people of Israel who are residing in the district of Goshen, they are spared of all of these. Now imagine not just enough flies to be an irritant, but a swarm, pandemic of flies that are across the land. Each one of these plagues is severely crippling the Egyptian economy. It's as Genesis closed, there is Joseph, the Hebrew, who is enabling the Egyptian economy. Now Pharaoh's exploitation of slaves is enabling their economy, but here comes God, and he is disabling their economy. And so verse number 25, Pharaoh summons Moses and Aaron and says, "Go sacrifice to your God within the land." So it's as if, I'll give you time off, but you cannot leave Egypt. Remember, the request was, let us go out in the desert 3 days and worship. Pharaoh is starting to bend, but he's hardly breaking at this point. But it's the beginning of his break. He's willing to negotiate. Hey, I will let you sacrifice, but do it within our land. You don't have to leave and go anywhere else. Verse 26, Moses says that would not be the right thing to do. It's not right to sacrifice on Egyptian soil. The Egyptians aren't going to want us to sacrifice on their soil. That there's purity issues involved with that in the ancient world. The Egyptians are going to see it, and it's going to be grotesque. Verse 27, we must go on a 3-day journey. Here, Moses and, of course, God has all the leverage here. What they're asking for is something extraordinarily modest. Just a 3-day work release. And Pharaoh says, verse 28, I will release you so that you may sacrifice. Only you can't go very far, verse 28, and you have to pray for me as well. And so verse 29, Moses says, I'm going to go out from you and pray to the Lord, and the swarms of flies will go away from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from the people tomorrow. Only do not let Pharaoh deal falsely again by not releasing his people. So Moses went out, prayed to God. God did as Moses asked. He removed the flies. But Pharaoh hardened his heart and did not release the people. Here, Pharaoh makes two proposals and negates his word on both of those. Um, he's worried about losing control of these people. First, you can do it, but you have to stay here. Then the next thing is you can go, but just go outside, right outside, immediately outside of Egypt. You can't go very far. And here, Moses and God even are the ones who are willing to negotiate, and Pharaoh, it remains a deceptive in all of this. And so we reached the 10-minute mark easily now, and so I'll let you go. Thank you for joining with me, and I look forward to meeting you again tomorrow for event number 9 now. Take care.